Bhagavate Sri Arunachalaramanaaya Namaskaram. Today I've been asked to answer 4 questions about the timeless relevance of Bhagavan's teachings. And I've been asked to complete it in 15 to 20 minutes, so I will try my best to answer them all. The first question I've been asked is, what are the aids that a sadhaka can use in order to progress in self-inquiry? In order to progress in self-inquiry, well, what are the obstacles that prevent us from progressing in self-inquiry? The first obstacle many people come across is not clearly understanding what the practice of Atmavichara actually is. And the second one is not having sufficient love to persevere in following this practice. So we need a clear understanding of what the practice is, and we need great love to follow this path. So in order to understand the practice, we need to study Bhagavan's teachings very carefully. That is, Bhagavan's teachings are very simple, and like his teachings, the practice of Atmavichara, self-investigation, is also very simple. But though his teachings and the practice are very simple, they're also very deep and very subtle. So we need to have a deep and subtle understanding in order to put his teachings into practice. So firstly, we need to understand what is Atmavichara. And as I say, we need to study Bhagavan's teachings carefully. Bhagavan has given us a very clear definition of what he means by Atmavichara in the 16th paragraph of Nana. There he says, Sadakalamum manate atmavilvetirabhikutan atmavichara mendrupaya. That means the name Atmavichara is only for always keeping the mind on Atma, on oneself. Well, when he says it, the name is only for, that means the name refers to always keeping the mind on oneself. In other words, how Bhagavan defines Atmavichara is always keeping our mind on ourselves. Keeping the mind on something means keeping the attention on it. So in effect, what Bhagavan is saying here, Atmavichara is simply being self-attentive, keeping our mind or attention always on ourselves. But the difficulty many people have is not understanding what is meant by keeping the attention on oneself. For this, we need to understand what Bhagavan means by Atma or oneself. So we need to understand that we are not this body or mind or any object. Anything that appears or disappears is something other than ourselves. We are the one thing that is ever shining throughout waking, dream, and sleep. That is this fundamental awareness, I am. So this is what we need to attend to. This is not because it's not an object. Many people have, if we ask people to, Bhagavan had asked us to meditate on a mantra or a name or form of God. That is something objective and therefore relatively easy for us to understand. If we're asked to meditate on the name Ramana, we can easily meditate on the name Ramana. If we are asked to meditate on a Bhagavan's form, we just have a picture of Bhagavan and we meditate on his form. But when he asks us to meditate on ourselves, that's on this fundamental awareness I am. This is something much deeper and more subtle. So in order to understand this correctly, we need a deep and subtle understanding of Bhagavan's teachings. Therefore, it's necessary for us to study Bhagavan's teachings very carefully. And when I say study his teachings carefully, I'm referring particularly to his own original writings, works like Nana, Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham, Amavidya, Arunachastuti Panchakam. These original writings of Bhagavan are where he's expressed his teachings most clearly. If we study these works carefully, we will not only that will not only help us to understand what the practice is, it will also give us the love to practice this, because Bhagavan not only explains what the practice is, he explains why this practice is necessary. So by studying his teachings carefully, thinking about them in order to make sense of them, and trying our best to put them into practice, this is the way forward. Studying his teachings carefully is what is called sravana. Thinking about them carefully in order to make sense of them, in order to understand them clearly, is called manana. And actually putting it into practice is called nididhyasana. So this sravana, manana, nididhyasana should be going on in our life constantly. The deeper we go in the practice, the deeper our study will become, because our sravana will become, because by going deep in the practice, we come to see deeper deeper layers of meaning and implication in Bhagavan's words. And as we go deeper in the practice, we gain greater clarity. And with that greater clarity, our manana will also become deeper. So this sravana, manana, nididhyasana, each one supports the other. So the best aid in this progressing this path is constantly studying and thinking about Bhagavan's teachings, and then trying our best to put them into practice. The second question I've been asked is, we wake up from deep sleep or dream sleep to the same people, objects, and places around us. Furthermore, other people who were awake when we were sleeping are able to corroborate our view of the world. How do we reconcile this with Bhagavan's teaching about the reality of the world? Well, again, here we need to study Bhagavan's teachings carefully and think about them carefully, try to make sense of them. Bhagavan teaches us that this world, this what we now take to be the waking state, is actually just a dream. So how can we make sense of this? If we think about it carefully, there's nothing that we experience in the waking state that we could not equally well experience in dream. Therefore, we have no reason to suppose that our present waking state is anything other than a dream. So if we're willing to accept Bhagavan's teaching that this is all just a dream, then everything falls into place about what he taught about the reality of the world. For example, we wake up from deep sleep or dream or deep sleep or dream sleep to the same people, objects, and places around us. Yes. People say, but when we dream, each dream we find ourselves in different places with different people and everything. So this is this not a difference between waking and dream? No, it is not, because we shouldn't take each day to be a different dream. The whole of our present life, as this person whom we now take ourselves to be, this is all one long dream. And this dream is periodically interrupted by periods of sleep. And the sleep is interrupted by periods of dreaming. So the dreams we have at night are dreams within a dream. So the whole of our life is one continuous dream. So that is why when we wake up to the same people, objects, and places around us. Regarding other people corroborating our view of the world, yes, this is something people often used to ask Bhagavan. Bhagavan, I may not have known about because one of the things, if this is all a dream, one of the implications is that a dream exists only when we are dreaming, when we're actually seeing the dream. When we're not seeing the dream no longer exists. So if this is just a dream, In, in sleep, there's no body or world or mind or anything. This is something Bhagavan often said, and people often used to object to this, saying, though I'm not aware of the world when I'm asleep, or I'm not aware of my body when I'm asleep. Others who are awake are aware of it, and they assure me that when I was sleeping, the body and world continued to exist. If we think about this carefully, in dream, if we ask the dream people, the people in our dream, did this world continue to exist when I was asleep? They will laugh and say, yes, of course it did continue to. You may have been sleeping, but we were awake and we saw the world even when you were asleep. When we're dreaming, we may be impressed by their assurance that the world we're then experiencing existed even when we were asleep. But if we wake up from a dream, as soon as we wake up from a dream, we recognize it's a dream, and then we recognize that those other people who assured us that the dream world continued to exist, they themselves are a part of that dream world. Likewise, as Bhagavan said, asking people to testify that the world existed when we were asleep is like asking a thief to testify his innocence. In a court, if someone is accused of robbery, the court won't take that. If that person says, no, I bear witness to the fact that I didn't steal, the thief's word will not count for anything because he's the one who's accused. Likewise, when we doubt the reality of the world, we can't call upon the people in the world to assure us that the world is real. It's just like asking the thief to testify for his own innocence. So the testimony of others doesn't help us. If this is all just a dream, the testimony of others doesn't count for anything. So we need to, as with all aspects of Bhagavan's teachings, we need to study very carefully what he taught us and think about it carefully in order to make sense of it. What Bhagavan teaches us about the reality of the world, or rather the unreality of the world, makes perfect sense if we think about it carefully. So it's up to us to think about it, to consider Bhagavan's words very carefully and make sense of them and understand the justification for what Bhagavan has taught us. Sorry, I'm having to rush a bit because I've limited time, so I have to skip from one question to another. The third question is verse 39 of Anubandham, that's Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham, is about not showing the bhava of Advaita towards one's guru. What is the recommended relationship with one's guru? What Bhagavan says in this verse, I'll read it sentence by sentence. The first sentence is Advaitam endrum ahatu uruha. That means always experience Advaita in the heart. That's the most important thing. We have to experience Advaita, but if we can experience it only in our own heart. Or podum Advaitam segail artraha. That means do not even once perform Advaita in action. That is, if we think about it, this is obvious. That is, action is possible only in a state of duality. It's only when we experience ourselves as a body and therefore experience the world, we are then experiencing duality. We're experiencing ourselves as the subject, the experiencer, the seer, and the world of the seen, and the body of the seen. So we're in a state of duality. Only in duality is action possible. So trying to perform Advaita in action shows a lack of understanding of what Advaita is. Advaita can only be experienced in the heart. And then in the next sentence he says, Putrene, Advaitam Ulladu Ahum. Advaitam mu Ulladu Ahum. That means O son, Advaita is appropriate in the three worlds. What are the three worlds Bhagavan is talking about here? It's referring to um, Brahma Loka, Vishnu Loka or Vaikuntha, and Shiva Loka or Kailasha. So what is meant by Advaita is appropriate in the three worlds? It may be appropriate to go to Brahma Loka and say to Brahma, you and I are one. It may be appropriate to go to Vaikuntha and say to Vishnu, you and I are one. It may be appropriate to go to Kailasha and say to Shiva, you and I are one. But the next thing is Guru Vinodu Advaitam Ahadu. Advaita is not appropriate with Guru. Why is this? The function of that is these Trimurtis, they are expressions of three of the Panchakriti, the five divine functions. That is creation, sustenance, dissolution, veiling, and grace. Brahma's function is creation. Vishnu's function is sustenance, sustaining the world. Shiva's function is destroying the world. This is a simplification, but this is what is signified here. So we are creating the world. When we dream, we create a world. As we continue dreaming, we're sustaining that world. When we wake up from a dream, we dissolve that world. So if all this waking state is also a dream, we are creating, sustaining, and dissolving this world. Just we are performing the functions of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. But the function of Guru is then veiling. Veiling is necessary. Why veiling is said to be one of the five divine functions is it's only under the veil of self-ignorance that this creation, sustenance, and dissolution can take place. The function of Guru is the fifth kritya, that is anugraha, grace. Grace is that power which brings about the dissolution of ego, thereby dissolving the veil, under the cover of which creation, sustenance, and dissolution takes place. So even if we could perform the functions of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the function of grace is the prerogative of Guru. As Bhagavan says in the 12th paragraph of Nana, Kadavalum Guruvum Unmail Verala. God and Guru are in truth not other. So Guru is God, but Guru is the ultimate function of God. The ultimate function of God is to annihilate ego and thereby remove the veil under the cover of which this creation, sustenance, and dissolution takes place. This function of grace can be performed only by God in the form of Guru. So even if we want to try and perform Advaita in action before the three gods, I mean, obviously it would be foolish to do so, but even if Bhagavan said, even that is appropriate, but it is never appropriate to have such an attitude with Guru. That is, we need to have Advaita in the heart. We need to recognize that Bhagavan, our beloved God and Guru, is ever shining in our heart as our own being. So that we need to cherish in our heart. But outwardly, to the name and form of Bhagavan, that is, Bhagavan appears in name and form. He appears as a body because we mistake ourselves to be a body. Bhagavan is not the body he appeared as, but shining through that body in which he appeared is that supreme reality that we call God or Guru. So we should always be humble and always, what should our bhava be before Guru? We should bow. That is, when we prostrate before Bhagavan, what does that symbolize? That symbolizes the subsidence of ego. When ego subsides, it subsides back into the heart. That is the true bhava we should have towards Guru. My 20 minutes are nearly up, but the next question is about free will versus destiny. So I have to reply to this very, very briefly. In verse 19 of Ulladu Narpadu, Bhagavan says, Vidimati moolam vivekam ilake, vidimati vellam vivadam. Only for those who do not have discernment of the root of fate and will is there dispute about which prevails, fate or will. The root of fate and will is ego. That is, as ego, we have a will of our own. We act according to that will. And as a result of the actions we do under the sway of our will, under the sway of our vasanas, or what are called agamya. Agamya, uh, when we do agamya, there are fruit to be experienced. That fruit gets stored in sanchita, and from that sanchita, Bhagavan selects certain fruit for each life for us to experience. That what we are destined to experience in this life, that is the destiny. So all that we are meant to experience in this life, we will experience, and we cannot experience anything that is not destined. So Bhagavan goes on to say in that verse, Vidimati Gakku O mudal am tanne unanda ave tananda. That means those who have known themselves, but who is the one origin for fate and will, have discarded them. What he implies there is when we know the reality of ourself, the reality of ego, ego is the one origin for fate and will. When we know the reality of ego, ego is thereby dissolved, and thereby fate and will come to an end. So they have discarded them. So fate and will apply only so long as we rise as ego. And but our will determines what we want to experience. Fate determines, or destiny determines, what we are to experience. So actually, there is no conflict between them. This vidimati vellam vivadam, this dispute about which prevails, arises because of a lack of understanding. If we understand that we have freedom to want whatever we want to want, and we have freedom to try for it, but we have no freedom to experience anything that we are not destined to experience. As Bhagavan wrote in the note for his mother, Endrum naduvadadu, enviachikanum naduvadu. What is never to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. When he says enviachikanum, in spite of any amount of effort, that what he implies thereby is we have the freedom to want to experience things we're not destined to experience. We have the freedom to try, to make effort for them, but we have no freedom to experience them unless they're destined to experience, unless we're destined to experience them. And in the next sentence he says, Nadapadu entadeseyanum niladu. What is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstruction. So if something is destined to happen, we are free to want it not to want to avoid it. We are free to try to avoid it, but we are not free to avoid it. So fate or destiny, vidhi, determines what we are to experience. Our will determines what we want to experience and what we try to experience. But if we want to experience and try to experience anything that is not destined, or if we want to avoid experiencing and try to avoid experiencing what is destined to experience, we are thereby doing a gamya, creating fresh fruit, and that's how we fall, as Bhagavan says in verse 2 of Upadeshundya, that's how we fall in Kriti Mahodado Patanakaranam. In Sanskrit, he says the cause for falling into the great ocean of action. But in the Sanskrit version of Upadesh Saram, he doesn't actually specify what is the cause, but in Tamil he makes it clear. He says vittai as seeds. The seeds that cause us to fall in the great ocean of action are our Vishaya Vasanas. And the Vishaya Vasanas are what constitute our will. I've gone a little over time, but so I can't elaborate upon this more, but it's a very deep and important subject to understand. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya.